hear my cry, O Lord, when I cry out with my voice, and be gracious to me and answer me. And immediately in verse 8, seek my face. Now, most of the Bible translations say when you said, but that's actually not in there. It's just an implied. This is God's response. And so it's an immediate response from God. David cries out, and God responds. But there's something that David asks for prior to that, which I always love about David. You know, a lot of the Psalms are David's frustrations. and I love reading those because there are times that I'm frustrated in my life, and I feel like just venting a little bit. Talking about those things and talking to God about those things. And David and God had this very open relationship. He could be angered at something and share that with the Lord. Job did a similar thing. Now, he did not curse God. Job did not. David never does that either. He has the right perspective, but he lets out himself, who he truly is and what he truly feels in this moment. And he says, hear my cry and be gracious to me and answer me, right? He's not just praying and then with not thinking that God is not going to respond. God does respond, and he knows he's going to respond, but yet he cries out for that. Answer me. Be gracious to me. I love that word gracious. That's actually the second thing to remember. Not only do we need to pray, not only do we need to cry out to God when we have those feelings of abandonment, when we feel like all hope is lost, but we also need to remember that God is gracious. Grace is not really the word here. It's gracious, which actually literally is translated, have mercy on me. Right? So mercy and grace are a little bit different. Mercy is forgiven debt. Right? You incurred debt and that debt is forgiven. Right? That's mercy. A judge in a court of law can extend mercy to the defendant. If they plead guilty, he can say, well, you know what, we're going to cut off a lot of that sentence. We're going to just wipe the slate clean if you'll do community service. Whatever the case is, that's mercy being shown there. Whereas grace is added blessings. Right? A lot of people define it as undeserved favor or unmerited favor. You did nothing to earn this, and yet you're getting those blessings. And when the New Testament uses the word grace, it's actually both of them combined. It's God's mercy and God's grace combined in the one word of grace. We know that we have incurred debt upon us in our sinfulness, and yet God forgives that debt. But not only that, he does so much more. He extends grace. He gives us blessings. He gives us eternal life, so on and so forth. And so mercy and grace are a little bit different. But this word gracious in the Old Testament means have mercy on me. Of course, if you remember Jesus telling the story about the Pharisee and the tax collector, right? And they both go out to pray. It says in Luke chapter 18, verse 9, and he told this parable to some people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. He says, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and was praying this to himself, God, I thank you that I am not like those other people, the swindlers, the unjust, the adulterers, and even like this tax collector here. Points him out right there. I fast twice a week, I pay tithes, all that I get, but the tax collector, standing some distance away, wasn't even willing to lift up his eyes to heaven. And he didn't talk bad about the Pharisee or anything like that. All he did was beat his breast and say, have mercy on me, a sinner, right? That's the idea. The tax collector knew where he stood with God. He knew that he had every right to be judged, and he cried out to God for mercy. That's the idea here. God is gracious. God is merciful. Right? So David says he's crying out in a sense. I imagine he's angry because of all the bad things that keep happening to him, and he cries out with a loud voice and says, "Be gracious to me, extend mercy to me, and answer me." Right? He is pleading for God, and I think that's important for us to remember. We need to remember God's mercy because when we're in really difficult situations, when we're in bad circumstances, it's very easy to forget that God extends mercy to us. We know about God's blessing us, Yeah, it's obvious when God blesses you, right? Your bank account's stable. Your possessions are intact. Your life is good. Your health is good. Your family is happy and healthy, right? All these things. We know when we're being blessed. We don't often know when God is being merciful to us. Oftentimes we think, well, if we're in the absence of blessing, then that must mean God is mad at us. Or that must mean that, we're not getting God's mercy. When the truth is, we're getting God's mercy a lot more than we realize. David acknowledges this. He says, I understand that you are gracious to me, and I ask for that grace, that mercy. I ask that you would answer me.